Welcome, everyone. Great to see you here today.
A gente nunca consegue assistir o começo, mas já veio aqui.
Verdade, nossa, faz tempo que eu não vejo isso.
Minha esposa.
Primeiro eu gostaria de lembrar que hoje é o nosso último evento público aqui do FSS iniciando. E a gente vai retornar dia 5 de janeiro, que é um domingo, então vamos retornar assim, com uma palestra igual hoje. Obrigado para todos que participaram da nossa confraternização de Natal no final de semana passado, foi muito bom, gratidão.
Sei que está longe ainda, mas como a gente falou da festa de Natal, reservem as datas, dia 2 de fevereiro a gente vai ter um evento especial aqui no centro para falar sobre o ano 2025 e o que a gente pode trabalhar junto. Então, 2 de fevereiro, é um domingo.
Marquem os calendários. Muito bem. So, switching to English now. To start off, I'm going to read a text. Actually, it's not a text. It's a song. I'm not going to sing. I'm just going to read. Trust me, you don't want to sing. It's one of my favorite Christmas songs, and it was written about in the 1800s in France and translated into English. And it's called "O Holy Night." O holy night, the stars are brightly shining. It is the night of our dear Savior's birth. Long lay the world in sin and error pining, till he appeared and the soul felt its worth. A thrill of hope, the weary world rejoices, for yonder breaks a new and glorious morn. Fall on your knees, hear the angel voices, O night divine, O night when Christ was born. Truly, he taught us to love one another. His law is love, and his gospel is peace. Chains he shall break, for the slave is our brother, and in his name all oppression shall cease. Sweet hymns of joy in grateful chorus raise we. Let us, all within us, praise his holy name. And the song is sang by a multitude of singers. You can find different versions online. So let us start with a prayer, closing our eyes and elevating our thoughts into our Master Jesus and these times of Christmas, of birth, of rejoice, And we ask you, Jesus, to help us today. Open our hearts so we can learn from you how to love. How to take your lesson from something that's far away, written in a book, to our hearts, to our lives. And as it always does, may that love also provide the healing, the peace that we long for. We also thank you for the opportunity to be here today in communion, talking about you, learning from you, and from all others that you've touched. May we find the solace. May we find the peace. May we find the answers that we're looking for today. So be it. Okay. So, learning to love with Jesus. I usually give this talk at Christmas time. And I changed it a bit. And when we look at, there is actually a text that I believe we read this at our Christmas event last year. But it's a passage from Humberto de Campos, who used to be a journalist in Brazil. And it's in the book called Pontos e Contos. And when he talks about Christmas and he talks about the birth of Jesus, and he starts by saying that Jesus came at a time of recess, in a way, in a time that things are slowing down. And it's an interesting reflection because it tells us, it shows us that he came at a time that we are reflecting. He came at a time that we're slowing down and start to reflect about the past and start to reflect about the future. It's a more introspective time, which is when we need him the most, right? And then he came to show his love and to show his teachings right in that time when we needed him the most. So that was a bit of an understanding on one of the reasons why he came when he did. And if we're trying to learn, right, how to love with Christ, this is one of his greatest commandments, if you will, or one of his greatest messages. In Matthew, when he talks about love. As the song said before, if we were to sum up the entire gospel of Jesus, we could sum it up in one word, and that would be love. And so he, in Matthew, he said, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself." So in this piece here, it's really interesting because we think about the order of love. That first we look at loving God, then loving our neighbor, and then at last there, loving yourself. Joanna de Angelis in the book, I believe, Love and Beautiful Love, she talks about this, like the dynamics, and starts to actually deconstruct this a little bit more. Because even though as yourself is towards the end, is the very last, he uses a comparison there, right? So you shall love your neighbor as yourself. So if you were to truly interpret this, you'd realize that loving yourself is actually the first thing that Christ is inviting us to do. And that's what Joanna explains, right? The first idea, or the first step would be to love ourselves, and then as we love others, as we love ourselves, then we can love others and fully embrace the love for God. So loving ourselves would be the Horcrux, if you will, if you like Harry Potter. It would be the piece that we'd be looking at to start with. And we always talk about self-love here at FSS. There are quite a few talks. And self-love, I think it's quite important, especially during these times. As we're approaching, the end of the year, a lot of times we start thinking about resolutions that we probably set out in the beginning of the year, that we thought, oh, this year I want to do this, this, and that. And then now you sit down and start to reflect, and you might think, well, I did nothing of what I wanted to do, right? And that's when we might start to go down a train of thought that, I didn't do anything I wanted, I'm worthless, I didn't have the discipline, and start to divert away from that self-love that Jesus invited us to look at. So in these times, it's really important to keep our self-love in check, especially when we go through those thoughts, through those reflections, and as we start to plan the next year, right? What are the things that we might think that are worthy to be accomplished or done next year as well? And if we are in that line of thoughts that we might not be, I'm not capable because I wasn't able to do that goal that I wanted, there is a passage from Christ that already talks about that when he says in Matthew 5, which is the Sermon on the Mount, arguably one of the most important passages of the gospel. He says to all of us, you are the light of the world. Right? So he was already telling us there that we are the light of the world. So when we're feeling worthless, or when we're feeling that we're not very good, or that we didn't accomplish what we wanted to do, we can remind ourselves of what Jesus had already told us, that you are the light of the world. So who do you think we should believe, Jesus or our own thoughts when saying that we're not good enough? Right? I think there's
who's more truthful?
Yeah, who's more truthful? Right? Now the beautiful thing about Jesus is that he was talking to our potential. He was talking to what we can achieve, and he knows we can. Because, and this is what Spiritism brings around Christ, is the fact that Christ is a brother, he's not God. Christ is a brother who was born just like us and got to that level of a spirit, of a pure spirit. And so when he talks to us, saying that we have the potential of becoming him, like he said, you have the power to do everything that I did and even more. That is showing that when we are feeling down, that we think we don't have the potential. Believe in Jesus when he said that we all do. And so, why Jesus? Why then believe him? There are many others that we can look up to, that we can learn from. So why are we talking? Why are we talking about Jesus? And this is when we get to the Spirit's book there, the blue one. When Kardec, in the section 3 of the Spirit's book, that's when Kardec starts talking about the moral laws, or the divine laws. And at the start, Kardec is already planning that he'll do that, and he asks the question. So, in this section of the book, we're going to be talking and understanding and digesting the divine laws. These are all words. Is there someone that has lived all these divine laws, have lived all these virtues that we can use as a model and as a guide, right? As opposed to just believing words. Is there someone that we can look up to? Is there someone who's done it, and then we can use it as a model and guide? That was the question that Kardec asks. 625. What is the most perfect type of God that God has offered to human beings as their guide and model? And the answer is, look at Jesus. So the spirits were already telling us there to look at Jesus. If you were at the our Christmas event last week, we were talking about Jesus, and then Sonia, she brought a passage from the Gospel. It's when Pilate or Pilatus presented Christ as he was going to be crucified. And Sonia, she was talking about how Pilate presented Jesus at the time. And he said, "Behold the man," in John chapter 19. And this is a quite profound sentence, because at the time, I mean even today, crucifying someone is one of the lowest ways you can sentence someone to death, especially to Jews at the time. And someone in their families were being crucified. That meant that after that person was never to be spoken of again, because it's almost like they were trying to dehumanize, like he never existed. So that's how low crucifixion was at the time. Yet, when Pilate presented Jesus before crucifixion, and this is an interpretation of Emmanuel. There's a text here in this book, Living Spring, that talks about this. He said, when presenting Jesus, Pilate did not say, "Here's the condemned, here's the victim, here is the, what's the other word? The defeated." He simply said, "Behold the man," right? So he already knew, I guess, deep down who Jesus was. And apparently, Emmanuel goes on to say, "Apparently defeated, the Master emerged in full spiritual greatness, revealing the highest standard of human dignity. Reflecting then on this moment, let us remember that only through the moral teachings of Christ will we reach true humanity." So this was a reflection from Emmanuel on this book, that even then, Pilate, the person who took him and persecuted Jesus, already knew how big, how great he was. Okay, so now let's talk. What do you guys think? It's a loaded question. What do you guys think was one of? You can't really, sum up everything that Jesus represented, but if you were to think about to you, well, what are some of the purposes of Jesus coming to earth? We've already talked about one. What do you guys think?
To show that it's possible.
What is possible?
It's possible to change and to be good.
To follow the divine laws.
That example, right? Yeah.
I think maybe also to show people another perspective, another way of living, and make them break the cycle of being like murdering people in the middle of the streets. And there's another way to go. So I think Jesus showed that there's another way to go, and the most loving way to go to live a life.
Yeah, exactly. And if we were to think about the heroes of that time, what would classify someone as a hero? A hero at the time was the one that had the biggest army, or the one who killed the most, or the ones who freed their people again through killing others. So that was what was classified, or what was deemed as a hero at the time. And so, like Carol was saying, Christ came to change that aspect of what it is to be a hero. And as a result, Christ didn't use violence at all, right? So instead of showing his his physical strength, he came to show his moral strength. And this is a question that was raised in our Christmas event last week, which was really well done. I had never thought about it. And Alice asked us, as Christ went through the crucifixion, right, and then eventually died, was that a sign of hopelessness to the people that were going to follow him? Was it a message that, if you follow me, you're going to end up dead in a cross? right? And that would bring a level of hopelessness, right? That was a question, and I think it was a very valid one. Because if we look at exactly what happened, if we look at the what, that's what it means, right? If you don't understand or know about Christ, if you're just looking at what happened, that could be a conclusion that we may arrive. Do you guys think that's true? Do you guys think there was another message there?
I think
It's
how.
Go
Sorry.
ahead.
No, I think the message was how, not what happened, how he dealt with what happened. The example that he showed when he was there.
That's the same conclusion that I came to, Marcella. Thank you.
I think there's a message of, like to myself, of forgiveness as well. Like forgiving, because he says like, God forgive people because they don't know what they do or something like that, right?
Right.
So I think it's how we deal with that, and I think we choose how to see it as well. We can see it as a sign of hopelessness, as you said, but because we kind of know how Jesus was, we also can say, okay, it's an example of forgiving
Absolutely.
as well.
Yeah, it's same as I mean, it's definitely the way that how he dealt with the situation. So same as I'm thinking about Esteban too. So makes the people think, what is this strength that he has that makes him to behave like that in that extreme situation as he's living right now.
Exactly.
So there's a much powerful thing happening. And this makes people think.
Yes, absolutely. That's really good. Thank you, myself. That's exactly the same conclusions I came to when we're comparing the moral strength versus our physical strength. It's completely different, and which one sticks to us the most, right? So, like you said, it wasn't what happened, but how it happened, right? How Christ behaved through that entire time, especially during the crucifixion, right? It was, what was he displaying? His moral strength was at display there. His level of serenity in times where you're being completely humiliated and you're being literally killed in front of everyone. Did he have the power to stop that? Yes, he did. If he wanted to, he could have. Right? He could have, came up as a hero at the time, and he could have, exacerbated or killed everyone around him and became and kept on living. Right? But he wasn't there to show his physical strength. He was there to show his moral strength. And that's the message that stays with us till today.
Because I think Alice said something about that last week too, like if he was healing so many people, why he didn't heal himself during the crucifixion, right? And that's exactly right. Because he was showing the moral part of everything, right?
That would just repeat the cycle.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's about power. I have the power, and then the whole message would not last as it lasts today.
And what better time to show humility, to show forgiveness, than while you're being crucified, right? So at the extreme, he was still able to show all those virtues. And that's why he is, like the Spirit said, he is our model and guide. Because at every time that he was put at extreme measures, he would still show his virtues. He would still show the divine laws in him. Now, if he had, like I said, right, like you said too, Louise, if he had done something else and escaped, or anything else that he could have done, we probably wouldn't be talking about him right now, right? Because so many have done that, right? So many have, when they were going through tribulations, especially in war, when they were defeated, they were able, to resurrect and somehow win the war. Those are not talked about as much as Jesus is to this day. And in this book here, called Boa Nova, or Good News, it's a very, very beautiful book. We always talk about it. It has roughly 30 or so chapters that are stories that happened either during Jesus' time or right after. And they're an expansion or a complement to the gospel. So it always goes back to the story of the gospel, and then it kind of develops it a little bit further. And this one is the Last Supper. When Jesus, the Last Supper he had with his apostles. And if you remember, there's that passage when Jesus kneels down and starts to wash the apostles' feet. And Peter, who was usually the short-tempered one, immediately went...
Peter.
As soon as Christ approached him to wash his feet, he said, "No, how dare you wash my feet? You're the master, you're the big. I'm never going to let you wash my feet." And he looked at the others with reprimand on his eyes, saying, "How dare you let Christ, who's our master, wash your feet? That's so beneath him to do." And Christ is always giving Peter a little bit of a lesson, right? He said, Peter, come on. He said, "You call me master and sir, and rightfully so, as indeed I am." This is a really interesting passage because we know how humble Christ was, yet he knew of his master. He knew of his greatness. So he was never denying how great he was. He knew exactly what he was. So that's why he said, right? "You call me master and sir, and rightfully so, because I am. If I, the master and sir, wash your feet, you should also wash each other's feet in the path of life, and as in the kingdom of good and truth." And this is the big sentence here when he says, "The big man is always the one that sincerely makes himself smaller than anyone else."
Leadership lesson.
Yes. Leadership 101. Exactly. And how many has he led? By living amongst us and preaching for only 3 years, still billions and billions follow this leader. Because it is in knowing his greatness and knowing his power that he made himself the least. And in this sense is that he was there to serve others, right? He was there to serve others, in this passage, to wash their feet. Always making them humble. And Marcella, I think somehow we talked overnight about this chat.
Oh, see?
Because we've already brought some passages.
We work together.
It works together. So thank you. Like Marcella was saying, this book, Paul and Stephen, my favorite book in Spiritism. There is a passage when Paul starts to, or sees Stephen for the first time. So Paul goes to the church where Stephen was preaching, and Paul at the time, if you guys don't know, Paul at the time had literally everything as far as power goes. He had power in the church, he had power in the law, he had power in money. He was young, he was strong, so he literally had it all. Yet when he went to see Stephen at this church, because at the time he was chasing Christians, people who were preaching Christ, he went into this church and looked at Stephen, and he became very envious. He really was envious to Stephen's peace. He couldn't understand in his mind, how can someone who has nothing, right? Stephen was really, really poor. He had nothing. He was living there. How can he have such peace when me, Paul, that have literally everything, don't have that peace? How does that work? How is that possible? And he became really envious of Stephen, right? And that became a very to the level that it was a sick feeling that led him to have a lot of rage towards all Christians, because he would see how a lot of Christians had peace, yet he didn't, right? So how can you have something I don't have, right? And in that feeling of rage and envy, he went on to kill and to chase down a lot of Christians. So it's interesting to talk about this, because it's again the difference that we talked about Christ between the physical strength, if you will, and the moral strength. Which is the one that touches you the most? Which is the one that you want the most? Right? You might think you want the physical and the material strength, if you will. Paul is the example of how that's not true, because he had it all, yet the one that he really wanted was the moral strength that he didn't have. So it goes a lot deeper when we're talking about our moral strength. And so, as we're talking about Paul, he's a great example for us to study, to learn from, because he went from someone who was chasing a Christian, killing Christians that ordered the death of Stephen, to encountering Jesus in a time of stress when he was traveling down to Damascus to chase more Christians. And he sees Christ, and in a moment that shifted him quite deeply, he was able to renounce to Christ and literally become his servant, asking him, "What do you want me to do?" Right? And then at that moment, he went on to live his life for Christ, to broadcast and to preach about Christ quite deeply. To the point where, this is interesting, to the point where this is towards the very last part of the book. And if you haven't read it, spoiler alert, Paul dies. No, it's the very last chapter of the book, Paul did die. And he was actually also incarcerated right before his death. And he was in Rome. He was being hosted by a family, a couple, and Paul. And then all three of them were incarcerated. They all went to prison. And then when in prison, when Paul was separated by his hosts, he said, "Let us have courage. This must be the last time we greet each other with our material eyes, but we shall meet again in the kingdom of Christ. The tyrannical power of Caesar can reach only the perishable body." So for a man who lived by all the material conquests to a point where he said, the perishable body doesn't matter anymore. Right? What truly matters is the fact that our spirit lives and that we will meet again after we pass on. And then the next day, it was when the guard came to kill him with a sword, and I'm trying to find his name here. It's called Tigelino. That was the name of the guard. And in that conversation, I'm not going to read everything, but it was really interesting to see how the guard at the time, sort of like Pilatus, when he was presenting Christ, he kind of knew already how big Christ was. This guard also knew the moral power that had Peter, because he said, "I regret having been assigned to this task." So he regretted being assigned a task to kill Paul. Now, he had killed many people before and after, but this one he really regretted. And he said, I cannot help but pity you. So the guard was pitying Paul because he was going to be killed. And Paul, in all his wisdom now, answered, I'm not worthy of pity. Have compassion on yourself instead. So he's facing the person who's going to kill him, and he said, have compassion on yourself because you have to do this. Right? This is very similar to what Christ said, like he said when he was being crucified. He said, "Oh Lord, forgive those because they don't know what they're doing." right? And in that level, like you're facing death, and still you can see the level of compassion that they have towards who's truly doing the wrong thing versus what they're feeling. And they go on to say, have compassion on yourself instead, for I died fulfilling sacred duties in service of eternal life. So he knew his job was done. And he could feel the peace in his core, in his spirit, because he knew what he had done on earth was profound to him. He was able to change and improve his moral strength, and then he had no fear to die and live on.
Peter, like
Yes.
a little bit of, it's a simple comparison, but as you were talking about New Year's resolution, we can compare the moment that Paul met Jesus. He could have had two other reactions, right? One, he could have said, oh my God, yeah, I was so bad. And guilty had consumed him, right?
Yes.
I did all wrong, I don't deserve this. Say, I'm done, right? That's one way, the same way that we can take a look at 2024 and say, yeah, I'm not worth it, right? Or Paul could have said, oh, they tricked me. I was expecting something different, and it's all my fault, right? So let's negotiate here. What can I do? So those two reactions. But what he decided to do is, o que queres que eu faça? What do you want me to do? It's move on and let's take action. The same way of everything that we do in our lives. It's not about guilt or excuse. It's okay. Let's figure this out, right? So I like that.
Yes.
What could have he had done, and he decided to take action. The same way we should do with our faith.
To have a lesson learned moment and then
Yes.
move on. Just don't stay in the guilt.
Yeah, very well said. And we have a great example of we talked about the two options of someone in that time who chose the guilt choice, right? When he realized what he had done to Christ, instead of moving on like Paul did, he fell into guilt and ended up killing himself, right? That was Judas. When he realized what he'd done, he fell into the guilt track and ended up committing suicide. And as you've realized, this is just a storytelling talk. The other one that we're going to see, these are examples of how Jesus has touched people's lives. And again, another example of this from this book. Her name was Joanna, wife of Cusa. This is in the Gospel. Escapes me where in the Gospel. But this is in the Gospel where when Jesus is at Peter's house, and then Joanna, she's going through quite a few things in her life, and she wants to go and see Christ, and then they talk, and she becomes a very profound follower of Christ, to the point where she after Christ passes, she continues to help the apostles and to spread the word of Christ till the end, when she also was crucified towards the end. This is chapter 15 of this book. And there is a famous story from her that not only was she being crucified, but she was being crucified next to her son, and they're actually being burned to death, not just crucified. So it's very graphic. But towards the end, when they are both there crucified, the fire's lit up, and they have the guards. And the guards were trying to get her to renounce Christ, to say that you don't believe in Christ, and then we'll let you go. The guards were testing Joanna. And then they said, renounce. And she wouldn't say anything. And then her son, who was next to him, said, please, Mom, renounce Jesus. Don't you see that we're lost? Renounce for me, your son. And then there were pleas from all the crowd, renounce, renounce, renounce. And then in all that midst of chaos, all she could hear was Christ when she met with him. when he said, "Go, my daughter, be faithful." And that really struck her in her life and basically guided her throughout her life as someone to be faithful to Christ. And to the point that she was able to gather, like Umberto de Campos says, superhuman strength to say to her son, "Be silent, my son. Jesus was pure and did not disdain sacrifice. Let us know how to endure in this hour of suffering, for above all the fleeting joys of the world, we must be faithful to God." And this is one of the most beautiful passages I find in this book, is when the guards, trying to force her to renounce, they ask, "Did your Christ teach you only how to die?" Trying to entice her, you know. And again, she gathers strength and said, "Not only to die, but also how to love you." Again, another example of someone who is on the verge of death and have that compassion towards their persecutors. And in that moment, she felt a hand over her cheek saying, "Take courage, Joanna, I'm here." And that was Christ welcoming her to the spiritual world. So, quite powerful examples of how Jesus has touched many people's lives. And this woman is the one we know nowadays as Joanna Jambos, who's written a lot of books through the mediumship of Divaldo Franco. And if you think, Haroldo makes a joke. If you look at Joanna in the movies, she's all very, how can I say, looks very, very pure in a very clean clothing and all that. Thinking, she didn't have to endure anything. She's all blessed and at peace. But she did have to endure a lot to be able to get to that level of moral ground that she has now. Now, this happened, almost 2,000 years ago. I'm going to bring an example that happened last century.
I guess I met you tonight as well, because I was just thinking about the example of Gandhi when he faced the British soldier. I don't know if that's the one that you're bringing it up.
Please go ahead.
There was a big gathering this night.
Yeah, so this really called my attention as a recent example of Jesus and like how he stayed with us with someone that is not even Christian, right? Gandhi, and it's very graphic on my mind when Gandhi meets a British soldier under the imperialism, and he's just like humiliated and like kicked or like punched and falls on his knees, and he doesn't react. So there is like. And that brings to the Sermon of the Mount, like being pacific.
Yes.
And living with the example. And then he stands up and he's kicked and punched again. And the soldier comes and says, "Who taught you to be so coward?" And then he just answers like, "The same person that you have on your neck or on your necklace, whatever." And then at this point, the soldier just bends and starts sobbing. So yeah, I was just thinking.
Thank you. Exactly, that was the exact example, right? So very similar to Joanna, right? When the guard kicks Gandhi a second time, he falls on the ground, he stands up and doesn't do anything. The guard, like Jules said, asks, "Who taught you to be such a coward?" Right? And then he points at the guard's necklace here. That guy who was on the cross that taught me. Right? And then, like you said, the guard kind of starts sobbing and realizes that, oopsie. This guy who's on my heart here has taught me non-violence, and yet he was applying violence that wasn't even needed, right? So that is a great example, a current, right, example talking about humility. And I'm going to skip this one. Hold on, just a second. Oh, yeah. The other one, now this is a quicker one, is it's talking about the Zebedee family, again from this book. Zebedee was the father of James and John from the Gospel. And he was a Pharisee, he was a Jew. And, I mean, they're all Jew, but he was not Christian. And, I didn't want to show that before. So he went to their house for a meal, and then Christ starts to talk to him. And they had a conversation where Christ revealed to him a God that didn't punish, a God that was not to be feared, but a God that brought love, a God that was friendly, a God that was affectionate. And at the end of the conversation, Zebedee was touched quite deeply, and then, as we've already read, right, he came to Christ's heart, and Christ was saying, "Cry, Zebedee, because your tears today are beautiful and blessed. You feared God, and now you love Him. You were lost in the human reasoning of the law. Now you have in your heart the spring of the living faith." Right, so again, another example of how Christ came to bring love to people and then shift a lot of times our thinking, giving us a new perspective. I brought a lot of examples also about crucifixion, and nowadays we don't do that anymore. That's not a common practice. So that's not to say that we're only going to be tried when we're crucified. So the invitation here is to bring it to our lives today. Right? What are the trials, what are the expiations that we're being trialed with today that we're invited to show that those virtues that Christ came to teach us? It's not crucifixion, it's probably not a guard kicking us, but what is it? Right? It usually starts at home with our families, right? If not with our families, with our work, with driving. There's so many areas in our lives, aspects of our lives where we can either show that we have learned that virtue, or if we haven't, it's an opportunity for us to learn, right? And never remembering that even though we might get it wrong, like Christ was telling Zebedee, God will never condemn us that we did it wrong. On the contrary, He will, like Christ said, you are the light of the world. He will give us the strength to show that we're capable, yes, of next time getting it right, or improving a bit. To the point where it goes along with Mari, what you said in the beginning. There's another passage from Christ. For those of you who don't know, this is the passage that we have where there's an adulterous woman that's being carried by the Pharisees to the town square, and then they throw the woman on the square, and trying to entice Christ, they ask Christ, "So, what do you do with an adulterous woman?" Right? The law says that you should stone her. And they were basically trying to Christ to say something against the law so they could incarcerate him. And he doesn't say whether or not you can, but he invites them for a reflection, for an inner reflection, right? He asks, he starts writing the sins of the Pharisees on the ground and asks, "Those who have not sinned, cast the first stone." Right? So it's never yes or no, but rather go within, reflect, and see if it's worth to do that. And then they left. And then Christ asks her, "Look around. Did anyone condemn you?" And she looks around, everyone left, so nobody condemned her. And then he said, "Then I don't find you guilty either. Go now and leave your life of sin, or sin no more." Right? Yes, what he did probably wasn't the best, but reflect upon it, and now, from now on, kind of like what we said about Paul, moving on, what can I do differently that next time? And I want to end. Why do you think these stories touch us so deeply? I don't know if it has. It hasn't. When I read them, it does. I can't assume it does to you, but why do you think it touches us so profoundly that we're still to this day talking about
I think it's in line with what we said in the beginning.
it?
At least to me, these stories show it's possible to get better, to do better, to develop a virtue in our lives, even though it's so hard sometimes. But it gives us hope, I guess. It shows like, hey, we are all the same here. We all have the same life resources. It's just a matter of like choosing to use them. And they show it's possible, so it's up to us.
I like that it's not about the what, but it's about the how. I like that comparison. Because I was thinking, someone said, I can't remember who, saying it's not what others do to you, it's how you choose to react to what they have done to you, right? So I think that was it's very important, because if you go back to your first point, love ourselves. And the one that we can only control is our own selves, right? So it's up to us to decide how we're going to react, because as you mentioned, the trials, the expiations, it will happen. It's like what our leader says, in this world, there's no way to live without frustration. Frustration will happen. Either we choose or not, it will happen, because it's part of the journey. So how we're going to react to those frustrations tells more, right? And another thing is, are we choosing to use the physical power or the moral one, right? So those are kind of...
Exactly, thank you.
With those stories, there is a reflection, because when Jesus was on the cross, a lot of people think, oh, he had the power to stop them, to make, but myself, I don't believe in a magician Christ. I don't believe in a magician God. I believe in the logic, the sequence of logic. Of course, Jesus was a very evolved spirit, so he knew the effect, physics, how to cause, for example, earthquake, a hurricane, though the physics, though the changes on the environment. Okay, but the power to make a magician and make the create the rain or the earth open, I don't believe, because the magician, the power of Christ was the love and the word, the simplicity, because when Christ came to the earth, it was to try an human experience, live as a human without power and the power of love only.
Thank you. Exactly.
Why would he break all the laws? What's the point of breaking all those laws? Right?
He
would just
show,
defeat.
It
defeats the purpose.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think like the main lesson for those stories about love as well. It's something that's quite simple when we use this word and it's overused, but it's also very complex and not easy. And throughout the examples, it's just like, it keeps reminding us that everything else shall pass. Nothing stands. It's not a temple, it's not a city, it's nothing. It's just everything you have, even your titles, like your education, your properties, everything is so temporary. And everything else is what you conquer, are the virtues, and this is what you bring with you. And if you don't do it, okay, it's okay. So there is hope, there is always another chance. And this is also like, when I think about Christmas and the end of the year, it's just this renewal and the hope that you will start again. It's just like a snapshot about like the eternal life. You start again, and January 1st comes, new resolutions and
next
new thoughts.
Monday.
and like the energy that let's keep going, let's just like I like the expression freio de arrumação. You just like tweak things a little bit and do more about what's working, reflect about what you can do best, and you keep moving forward and not alone, always as a group and as a community.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Yeah, now that you've had another year under your belt, a little bit more experience, right? What else can you do?
And when, as we can bring those knowledge for us that are far away from the Jesus, but trying to follow some examples, is sometimes we stay so angry, so hate to do our jobs, our tasks day to day, clean the house, prepare the kids, or wake up so tired, so we blame too much, but instead to thanks God or to put love in our mind. Okay, thanks God to have a house, to have to clean, to have a family that you need to feed, to have a job that you need to work. If sometimes I saw a podcast, then I try to apply when I'm angry, I'm nervous, my family, I am so straight with organization, I don't like nothing out of the place. So, then I try to concentrate myself. Of course, it's hard. Say, thanks God for have a house to have to clean. Thanks God to have a family that need to care. This same podcast that I saw is if there is a power to give someone $10 million, but in exchange you don't wake up tomorrow. What do you prefer? $10 million or don't wake up tomorrow? Then what matter? Your life is more than $10 million, any money, because what do you do with money if you don't wake up tomorrow?
Mm-hmm.
So your life is valuable.
Absolutely, thank you. Joan Evangelist has a book called Psychology of Gratitude, so thanks for bringing the idea of gratitude, where she gives this reflection about being grateful for the good that we receive, being grateful for the good, the bad that we also receive, and also be grateful for the bad that came close but went away. Right? So always be grateful.
For me, what touched the most was the phrase on the, I think it was one of the first one we said as well, like love the neighbor as you love yourself. That's a very popular phrase, but I've never thought about that the way you brought. Because sometimes I blame myself, and I believe everyone does, like for not loving the others like we should, like to have remorse, to have like bad feelings about people close to us or not so close. But do I love myself the way that I want to love them? Like it should start there. Like I should actually love myself and forgive myself of the things that I can't forgive. Like it should start there. Like it definitely touched me the way you brought, and it's gonna stay with me for the week for sure.
And there's a chapter in the Gospel according to Spiritism that explains a little bit more into our words. What does it mean to love those ones that you don't have that sympathy? Yeah. It will never be the same. Loving someone like in your family, or maybe not even the same family, but loving the one that you really like, right? That's different. That love is different from the ones that you have maybe something against it. So there is a whole explanation about it, and what does that really mean to do that? Yeah.
And the reflection about love others as yourself. It's always goes back to the fact that we say that we can't give something we don't have.
Yeah.
Right? So if we don't have that love for us, it's really hard to give it out. Something that we don't have.
I know that our time is almost done, but I think it's also important to connect with what he said, because I think these stories touch us so deeply. Because I believe that somehow we can easily put ourselves in their shoes, bringing their stories on our lives, on our day-by-day tasks. So they were like ordinary people. They were common.
True.
They made mistakes, full of mistakes. Yes. And they chose follow the rules, follow Jesus. So I think that's why they touch us, because they were exactly like us. If we want, we can put ourselves on their
It's closer.
Yeah.
Yes.
A little bit closer to us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Even though it has happened like so many years ago,
Mhm.
we definitely can see ourselves going from the same thing
Mhm.
and choosing, making better choices.
Yes, absolutely. And it wasn't a choice they had to make once
Yeah.
when they met Jesus or something, right? It's a choice every day to the last day.
And just one
Yeah.
last one.
It's the last one
point.
to use.
Because when you said about hope, it's interesting, and this is connected to why it touches me personally so
Yeah.
deeply. It's because sometimes we forget, at least I didn't know that until a few years ago, but Jesus also went through lots of reincarnations until he gets to the pure spirit that he is right now. So he didn't have all the reincarnations on earth, but he was born ignorant without knowing, as everybody else, but in another planet. Other planets.
Better choices.
But I guess this is my point in terms of hope, because if he is a pure spirit now, we can be too, doing our efforts to
We
reach
will.
that.
We will.
We will.
That's why
That's-
he's our
Yeah,
brother.
we will.
That's why he's our brother.
Yeah.
He was born the same way we did.
Yeah.
Just went a little bit faster.
Then depends
It's
on
not a
us, right?
race.
Yeah.
It's not a race.
Yeah.
We'll get there.
And I think it touches us that deeply as well, because it shows something that we truly long for, that our soul longs for, that our soul desires, that our soul really, really wants, right? Which is to develop our virtues. That's what our soul really wants. That's what it craves. And these stories speak to that. And like you said, it gives us hope because it shows that that's possible. Whatever our soul really longs for, it's possible. And also because they show them in action. It's not you're reading someone telling you what to do, but they're showing with a living experience, right? And that I think speaks to our conscience, where the divine laws are, right? They're showing it's possible. So to that question, right? Is crucifixion a story of defeat? Right? We can think about it now that no, it's not a story of defeat, but rather it's a story of moral victory. It's a story of a moral triumph, and that's why he lives till this day, and it touches us till this day. And that's we had more, but we'll leave it for next time.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah, we will. We have our passes now, so we'll end in a little prayer, and then we'll start our passes.
Can I just say one
Yes,
comment?
go ahead. Yeah.
Guys, we have the last fundraising happening today, the last fundraising of 2024. So we have some crafting items close to the door on the other room. Lots of things, t-shirts, anything, lots of things, and books. So think about if you still have to buy presents for our lovely, loving ones. We have some ideas there. Just want to say that. It's good.
Great. Thank you. So let us finish in a prayer, elevating our thoughts into our Master Jesus, this Spirit and this person that taught us what love is. We ask you, Master, please help us feel that love. Please help us feel that hope when we're hopeless. Please help us feel that moral strength when we can't find the answers. Please help us find peace in the midst of chaos. May your examples and all of those who've been touched by you serve as a model, as a guide to our daily lives, to our choices, to motivate us. And to feel our moral strength getting stronger and stronger. Thank you for all that you've done. Thank you for all that you do for us. And may your love surround you, surround us with protection, with consolation and motivation in the days to come. So be it.
So be it.